I knew I was in trouble the first time I heard the voice. It wasn't the kind of voice you'd expect from the shadows. No guttural growl or eerie whisper. No, it was smooth, persuasive, almost comforting. It was the voice of an old friend, one I hadn't spoken to in years, but somehow, deep down, I had always known it was waiting for me to slip. It all began when I decided to quit drinking. I thought it would be a struggle against my cravings, against the loneliness, but I never imagined it would be a battle against something that knew me better than I knew myself. It started with small things. I'd be alone in my apartment, staring at the dusty bottle of whiskey I had sworn off, and I'd hear it, a voice in my head, not quite mine, saying, "Just one drink won't hurt." It wasn't unusual at first, just the typical withdrawal symptoms, or so I told myself. But the voice grew more insistent, more persistent. It knew the perfect time to strike, always when I was at my weakest, when the world felt too heavy, and I needed an escape. It would remind me of the warmth of the alcohol sliding down my throat, the numbness it brought, the way it silenced the chaos in my mind. Then one night, as I lay in bed, the voice changed. It wasn't in my head anymore. It was in the room, coming from the corner where shadows twisted and danced. "Come on, just a sip," it urged, and I swear I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. I shot up in bed, heart pounding, eyes darting around the darkened room, but nothing was there, only silence, and the faint sound of my ragged breathing. The next few days were a blur of sleepless nights and endless anxiety. I started seeing things, flashes of movement in the periphery of my vision, dark shapes that vanished when I tried to focus on them. The voice became louder, more aggressive, mocking me for my weakness, taunting me with memories of nights lost in a haze of alcohol. It would tell me stories of the good times, the parties, the laughter, and I'd almost believe it, almost give in. But then the memories would shift, and I'd see the truth, the hangovers, the missed opportunities, the relationships I destroyed. The voice would twist those memories too, turning them into something sinister, blaming me, telling me it was all my fault, that I was worthless without the drink. It would laugh, a cold, hollow sound that echoed through my apartment long after the voice had faded. I started avoiding mirrors because every time I looked into one, I saw someone else staring back at me, a gaunt, hollow-eyed version of myself, with a twisted grin that made my skin crawl. I could feel its presence behind me, breathing down my neck, watching me with those empty eyes. And when I'd turn around, there'd be nothing but the creeping darkness of my apartment. I tried to get help, but every time I reached out, the voice would intervene. My phone would die, the internet would cut out, or I'd lose the courage to speak. It felt like the voice was always a step ahead, knowing my every move, anticipating my every thought. It was as if it had been a part of me all along, waiting for this moment, waiting for me to let my guard down. Then, one night, it went too far. I was lying in bed, fighting the urge to drown my fears in alcohol, when I felt a cold hand wrap around my wrist. I froze, paralyzed with fear, as the voice whispered in my ear, "You'll never escape me." I tried to pull away, but the grip tightened, and I could feel the icy fingers digging into my skin. I knew then that it wasn't just in my head anymore. The voice had taken on a form of its own, feeding off my weakness, my addiction. It was a part of me now, something I couldn't fight or flee from. The next morning I found bruises on my wrist, dark and angry, as if to remind me that it was real, that it was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. I don't know how much longer I can hold out. The voice is with me constantly now, whispering in my ear, urging me to give in, to let go. I'm starting to wonder if it's right, if maybe I'm better off giving in, letting it take control. After all, what's the point of fighting when you're already lost? It all started with a notification, a simple ding from my phone late one night, pulling me away from the half-hearted attempt at sleep I'd been struggling with. I reached over, the glow from the screen lighting up my bedroom in an eerie blue, and there it was, a friend request from someone I hadn't thought about in years. It was an old classmate, someone I barely knew back in high school, but the memories weren't good ones. In fact, they were some of the worst. Curiosity got the best of me, so I clicked on the profile. Immediately, I was flooded with images of them, smiling, living their best life, surrounded by friends and family, their feed a constant stream of happiness and success. But something didn't feel right. There was a familiarity in the photos, something unsettling that I couldn't quite place. Then I remembered, this person had died 2 years ago in a car accident. The shock hit me hard, and I quickly shut off the app, convincing myself it was a mistake, maybe a hacked account. But that uneasy feeling stayed with me, growing stronger as the night wore on. The next day, the notifications started pouring in. My feed was full of posts from that account, old photos, random status updates, things that seemed pulled straight from my own memories. The captions were cryptic, referencing moments we never shared, but somehow they felt deeply personal. And then came the messages. At first, they were just simple greetings, the kind you send when reconnecting with an old friend. But as I read them, I felt a chill creep down my spine. The messages grew more intimate, more intrusive, asking about things only someone close to me could know. It felt as if the person on the other side was watching me, knew my every move. I tried to block the account, but the option was grayed out, as if the app itself was against me. Every time I tried to close it, my phone would freeze, forcing me to restart it. And when I did, the messages would be waiting for me, more persistent, more demanding. Then one night, I received a video call request from the account. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the decline button. But I couldn't resist. Something about it drew me in, a morbid curiosity mixed with fear. I answered the call and immediately regretted it. The screen went dark, but I could hear something, a faint, distorted breathing, as if someone was on the other end. Then, slowly, the image began to clear, revealing a shadowy figure standing in what looked like my own living room. My blood ran cold as I recognized the layout, the furniture, even the half-empty coffee cup I had left on the table. The figure moved closer to the camera, and I saw their face, pale, hollow-eyed, and twisted in a sickening grin. It was my old classmate, or rather, something wearing their face. I tried to end the call, but the phone wouldn't respond, the screen frozen on that horrifying image. The figure leaned in closer, whispering my name in a voice that was both familiar and grotesque. "I'm back," it said, the words oozing with malice. "Did you miss me?" Suddenly, the call ended, and my phone went black. I was left sitting in the dark, trembling, my mind racing with fear and confusion. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that whatever had come through that call was still with me, lurking just out of sight. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. I'd wake up to find my phone open to that profile, new posts appearing out of nowhere, each one more disturbing than the last. The photos started to include me, candid shots taken inside my own home, as if someone had been following me, watching me. And the captions, they were taunting, mocking me, daring me to do something about it. I tried deleting my social media accounts, but it was no use. Every time I thought I had wiped them clean, they would reappear, more active than before. My phone became a prison, the notifications relentless, the messages more threatening. It was as if the account had taken on a life of its own, feeding off my fear, growing stronger with every passing day. And then, one night, I received a final message. "I'm coming." The lights in my apartment flickered, and the air grew cold. I heard a creak behind me, and I turned, expecting to see nothing but the empty room. But there it was, the figure from the video call, standing in the doorway, its eyes locked on mine. I dropped my phone and ran, but no matter where I go, I can feel it watching me, following me. It's as if it's always there, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, I can't escape it. I'm trapped in a nightmare, and the only way out is to face the horror I unleashed with a single, innocent click. I never believed in ghosts, at least not in the traditional sense. I thought the only real hauntings were the ones we carried inside us, the memories, the regrets, the things left unsaid. But I was wrong, so very wrong. It started when I took on a new job in a small town, a place where everyone knew everyone, and the air was thick with gossip. I needed a fresh start, a place where I could leave my past behind. So when I found a quaint little house for rent at a suspiciously low price, I didn't think twice. It was perfect, charming, isolated, just what I needed to clear my head. The first night was uneventful. I unpacked, settled in, and enjoyed the quiet. But on the second night, I noticed something strange. As I lay in bed, I felt an odd pressure on my chest, like something heavy was sitting on it, making it hard to breathe. I tried to brush it off as anxiety or fatigue, but the feeling persisted, growing stronger until it felt like I was being smothered. Just as I was about to panic, the pressure suddenly lifted, leaving me gasping for air in the darkness. The next morning I found myself exhausted, as if I hadn't slept at all. I shook it off, convincing myself it was just the stress of the move. But then, it happened again the next night, and the night after that. Each time, the pressure would build until I felt like I was drowning in my own bed, unable to move, unable to scream. I tried everything to make it stop. Sleeping pills, leaving the lights on, even rearranging the furniture. Nothing worked. The feeling was always there, that crushing weight, and I began to dread the night. I stopped sleeping altogether, too afraid of what might happen if I let myself drift off. One evening, in a desperate attempt to get some answers, I started researching the history of the house. What I found was disturbing. The house had belonged to a family decades ago, and there were rumors about what had happened there. Whispers of domestic abuse, of secrets buried deep within the walls. The family had vanished one night, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions, and a community too afraid to investigate. As I dug deeper, I found mentions of a young girl, the daughter of the family, who was said to have suffered the most. The townspeople believed she had been silenced, her pain buried along with her in some unmarked grave. The house had been empty for years after that, abandoned by those too scared to live there. It was then that I realized I wasn't alone. The weight I felt every night wasn't just in my head. It was her, trying to reach out, trying to make someone understand her suffering. The more I resisted, the stronger she became, and I knew I had to do something before it consumed me. That night, I prepared myself. I sat on the edge of my bed, waiting for the inevitable. When the pressure began, I didn't fight it. I let it wash over me, closing my eyes, trying to connect with whatever was there. And that's when I heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible, like a child's voice carried on the wind. "Help me," she said, her voice trembling with fear and sorrow. "Please help me." My heart broke at the sound, and I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just ignore her, not when she had suffered so much. I promised her I would help, that I would find a way to set her free. The pressure eased, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of peace. The next morning, I went to the local library, searching through old records, trying to find any clue about the girl and her family. After hours of searching, I found a small, faded article about their disappearance, a footnote in the town's history. It mentioned a stormy night, a fight that was heard by the neighbors, and then silence. No one had seen or heard from the family since. I knew what I had to do. That night, I began to dig in the backyard, following a gut feeling, an instinct that led me to a small, overgrown area near the edge of the property. It was there, under the cold, hard earth, that I found her, a small skeleton, wrapped in a tattered blanket, her bones crushed and broken. I wept as I uncovered her, my hands trembling, knowing that I had finally found the source of the haunting. She had been trapped here for so long, her spirit weighed down by the secrets she had taken to her grave. But now, she was free. After that night, the house felt different. The air was lighter, the shadows less menacing. I could sleep again, and the oppressive weight was gone. I left a few days later, knowing I couldn't stay in that place any longer, but also knowing I had done the right thing. I had given her the peace she deserved. But sometimes, late at night, I still feel a faint pressure on my chest, as if she's there, reminding me of the secrets we carry and the weight they can have on our souls. I've always had a complicated relationship with my reflection. Growing up, I avoided mirrors as much as I could, uncomfortable with the way my face seemed to twist and change when I looked into them for too long. It wasn't vanity, it was something deeper, something I couldn't quite put my finger on, until I found the mirror. It was an antique, old and weathered, with an ornate silver frame that seemed to shimmer even in the dimmest light. I stumbled across it at a flea market, buried under piles of forgotten trinkets and dusty furniture. There was something about it that drew me in, a magnetic pull that made me reach out and trace my fingers along its edges. The seller, a grizzled old man with a patchy beard, gave me a strange look when I asked about the price. He seemed almost relieved to see it go. I brought the mirror home, placing it in my bedroom, where it caught the light from the window just right. At first, I was fascinated by it, spending hours just staring into it, captivated by the way it seemed to capture every detail, every flaw in my appearance. But the more I looked, the more I noticed something wasn't quite right. It started with small things, a shadow in the corner of my reflection that wasn't there when I turned around, or a fleeting expression on my face that didn't match the one I felt. I chalked it up to tricks of the light, my mind playing games with me. But then the differences became more pronounced. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I noticed my reflection wasn't moving in sync with me. I reached up to brush a strand of hair from my face, but in the mirror, my hand stayed at my side, my reflection staring back at me with a strange intensity. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, as my reflection slowly raised its hand, mirroring the action I had taken seconds before. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself it was just a delayed response, a glitch in my perception. But deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. The next day, I avoided the mirror, but I could feel its presence, like it was watching me, waiting for me to come back. Curiosity got the better of me that evening, and I found myself standing in front of the mirror once again. This time, the differences were impossible to ignore. My reflection was smiling, a wide, unnatural grin that stretched across its face, even as my own lips remained still. It was a cold, predatory smile, one that sent a shiver down my spine. Panicking, I turned away from the mirror, but I could still feel the weight of its gaze on my back. I tried to cover it with a blanket, but the fabric slipped off the frame as if something had pushed it away. No matter what I did, I couldn't escape the feeling that the reflection was more than just a reflection. It was something else, something malevolent. Over the next few days, things escalated. I started noticing changes in my reflection that didn't match reality. Small cuts on my face that weren't there when I touched my skin. Bruises that appeared overnight in the mirror, but not on my body. The smile grew wider, more sinister, and my reflection's eyes seemed to darken, filling with a shadow that was anything but human. Desperate, I tried to get rid of the mirror. I took it outside, intending to smash it to pieces, but as soon as I raised the hammer, I felt a sharp pain in my head, like someone had struck me. I dropped the hammer, clutching my head in agony, and when I looked back at the mirror, my reflection was laughing, an eerie, silent laugh that twisted its features into something monstrous. I knew then that the mirror wouldn't let me go. It had claimed me, and there was nothing I could do to escape it. Every time I looked into it, I felt a little piece of myself slip away, as if my reflection was slowly draining my life, my essence, feeding off my fear and despair. I started covering all the mirrors in the house, but it didn't help. I could feel the presence of that cursed reflection wherever I went, lurking in the darkness, waiting for the moment when I would slip and catch a glimpse of it again. And when I did, it was always worse. My reflection would be standing closer to the glass, its smile more twisted, its eyes more hollow, more dead. I haven't looked in the mirror for days now, but I can still feel it watching me, its hunger growing stronger with each passing hour. I can hear it whispering to me in the dead of night, urging me to come back, to look one last time. I know that if I do, it will be the end of me. But the worst part? Sometimes, I catch a glimpse of my reflection in the corner of my eye, on the surface of a glass, in the gleam of a window, and it's not my face I see anymore. It's the reflection's, twisted and grinning, waiting for the moment when it can finally take my place. I moved into the old house on a whim. It was cheap, too cheap, but I didn't care. I needed a change, a fresh start away from the chaos of the city, and this place, with its creaking floors and peeling wallpaper, seemed like just the kind of solitude I craved. The real estate agent had warned me that the house had a history, strange occurrences, previous tenants leaving suddenly, but I shrugged it off. I didn't believe in ghosts or curses, just the real-world horrors I was trying to escape. The first night was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that presses in on you, making you hyper-aware of every little sound, every creak, every groan of the old wooden beams. But I told myself it was normal, just the house settling, nothing more. But then, the voices started. At first, they were barely audible, a faint murmur in the background, something you could easily dismiss as the wind or the pipes. I would hear them at night, just as I was drifting off to sleep, soft whispers coming from within the walls. I told myself it was just my imagination, the remnants of city noise playing tricks on me. But as the days passed, the voices grew louder, more distinct, until I could no longer pretend they weren't there. They sounded like a conversation happening just out of earshot, too muffled to understand, but clear enough to know it wasn't just in my head. Sometimes it was one voice, other times multiple, overlapping in a way that made my skin crawl. It wasn't just the sound of them, it was the tone, the way they seemed to be discussing something dark, something sinister. I started avoiding certain rooms, especially at night. The living room was the worst. Every time I passed by, I felt like I was interrupting something, like the voices would stop the moment I entered, only to start again as soon as I left. I tried to record them, thinking I could prove to myself that they were real, that I wasn't losing my mind. But every time I played back the recordings, there was nothing but silence, or worse, a low static that made my stomach churn. As the days turned into weeks, the voices became more aggressive. They weren't just whispers anymore. They were shouts, arguments, the kind you hear through thin walls in a rundown apartment building. I could hear them all through the house now, following me from room to room, echoing in my head long after the sounds had stopped. I started to lose sleep, the constant noise driving me to the edge of sanity. I could feel the house closing in on me, the walls seeming to breathe with a life of their own, pulsing with the rhythm of those disembodied voices. And then one night, I finally heard them clearly. It was late, past midnight, and I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when the voices began again. But this time, they weren't just muffled sounds. They were words, distinct and horrifying. "He knows," one voice hissed, sharp and filled with malice. "He can hear us. Then we must make him leave." Another replied, cold and calculating, "We can't let him stay." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, as the reality of what I was hearing sank in. They weren't just talking. They were talking about me. I felt a cold sweat break out across my skin, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps as I realized I wasn't alone in the house. Something was here, something that didn't want me there. I bolted out of bed, my mind racing. I had to get out. I had to leave. But as I made my way down the stairs, the voices grew louder, more frantic. "Stop him," they chanted, a chorus of voices now, overlapping in a chaotic symphony of fear and anger. "He must not leave." I felt the walls close in around me, the air growing thick and oppressive, as if the house itself was trying to hold me back. I stumbled, my vision blurring as the voices filled my head, drowning out my thoughts, my reason. And then I saw it. Movement in the shadows, a flicker of something dark and shapeless, sliding along the walls, following me. I could feel its presence, cold and malevolent, pressing in on me from all sides. I ran, throwing open the front door and bursting out into the night, the cool air hitting me like a wave of relief. The voices didn't follow me outside, but I could still hear them, faint and distant, echoing from the open doorway. I didn't stop running until I was far from the house, my breath ragged, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. I never went back. I left everything behind, my belongings, my new start, my hope for peace. I couldn't face whatever was in that house, whatever lived within those walls, whispering in the dark. I've tried to move on, to forget, but sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and still, I swear I can still hear them. Those voices calling out to me, waiting for the day I'll return. I always believed that perfection was achievable, that if I worked hard enough, I could mold myself into the ideal version of who I was supposed to be. Society had taught me that there was a standard, a flawless image I should strive for, and I bought into it completely. I spent years chasing that dream, never satisfied, always pushing myself harder, farther. But perfection has a price I never anticipated. It all started when I came across a small, unassuming shop, tucked away in a narrow alley downtown. I was on my way to yet another appointment, Another procedure that promised to fix the latest flaw I had convinced myself needed correcting. The shop sign caught my eye. The perfect you, achieve perfection in just one step. It was like it had been placed there just for me, a sign from the universe that I was on the right path. The inside of the shop was dark, lined with shelves full of strange, antique-looking objects. Mirrors, combs, brushes, all polished to a gleaming shine. Behind the counter stood a woman, older, with a face so smooth and unblemished, it looked almost unnatural. Her eyes were sharp, piercing, and when she smiled at me, I felt a shiver run down my spine. "You're looking for something special, aren't you?" she said, her voice smooth as silk. "I can see it in your eyes, the desire to be perfect." I nodded, feeling an odd mix of excitement and unease. "How did you know?" "I've been helping people like you for a long time," she replied, gesturing to the items in her shop. "I can offer you something no one else can. True perfection. All it takes is a single, simple step." "What do you mean?" I asked, curious despite the warning bells going off in my head. She reached under the counter and pulled out a small, ornate mirror, its frame inlaid with shimmering gold and silver. "This mirror shows you exactly what you want to see, the perfect version of yourself. But it's more than just a reflection. It can make that image a reality. All you have to do is look into it and truly desire what you see." I hesitated, staring at the mirror, its surface gleaming in the dim light of the shop. The idea was intoxicating. No more surgeries, no more painful procedures, just one look, and I'd be perfect. But something about the woman's smile made me uneasy. "What's the catch?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Her smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. "There's always a price for perfection. But it's different for everyone. The mirror will show you what you want, but once you take it, it's yours forever. No going back." I should have walked away. I should have turned around and never looked back. But the lure of perfection was too strong. I took the mirror, paid the absurdly low price she asked for it, and left the shop without a second thought. That night, I sat in front of the mirror, my heart pounding with anticipation. I gazed into it, and slowly, the image began to shift. My flaws disappeared. My skin became flawless, my features symmetrical, my body the perfect shape. I was mesmerized, lost in the beauty of the person staring back at me. I wanted it. I needed it. And as I kept staring, I felt a strange sensation, like something was pulling at my reflection, drawing it out of the mirror and into me. When I finally tore my eyes away, I was different. I looked exactly like the person in the mirror, perfect in every way. I felt a rush of euphoria, of triumph. I had done it. I had achieved the impossible. I was perfect. But the euphoria didn't last. As the days went on, I began to notice something strange. My reflection didn't always match my movements. Sometimes it would lag behind, staring at me with a look of contempt or mockery. Other times, it would move when I was still, twisting its face into expressions of anger or pain. It was as if the reflection had a life of its own, a life that was growing increasingly hostile. I started avoiding mirrors, but the feeling of being watched never went away. I could feel it, my reflection, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for the moment when I would look again. And when I did, it would be there, smiling that same cold, malicious smile the woman in the shop had given me. It wasn't long before the reflection started to take more from me. I'd look into a mirror and find myself staring back at someone I didn't recognize. Someone perfect? Yes, but with eyes that were hollow, lifeless. I felt like I was losing pieces of myself, as if the reflection was consuming me, replacing me with this perfect, empty shell. The changes became physical. My body started to feel strange, stiff, as if it wasn't mine anymore. My skin, once smooth and flawless, began to harden, cracking like porcelain. My movements became slow, deliberate, as if I were a puppet on strings. And then, one day, I couldn't move at all. I was trapped, staring at the perfect reflection in the mirror, unable to turn away, unable to scream as I watched my body become something else entirely. An image, a perfect statue of what I once was. My reflection, now completely separate from me, grinned, its eyes cold and cruel. I realized too late that the price of perfection wasn't just my soul, it was my very existence. Now I'm stuck here, trapped behind the glass, watching helplessly as my reflection lives my life, wears my face, and becomes everything I ever wanted to be. But it's not me. It never will be. And as I watch, I can only hope that one day, someone else will look into the mirror and take my place. But until then, I'm doomed to stay here, perfect and lifeless, forever. I never thought of myself as an envious person. I was content with my life, my job, and my modest circle of friends. Sure, I had moments of jealousy like anyone else, but I always shook them off, convinced that I was above such petty emotions. But envy has a way of creeping in, slowly, insidiously, until it consumes you whole. It began when I reconnected with an old friend, Emily, someone I hadn't seen since college. She was the kind of person everyone admired, beautiful, successful, with a life that seemed perfect from the outside. When we met for coffee one afternoon, I couldn't help but notice how everything about her screamed perfection. Her hair was perfectly styled, her clothes tailored and expensive, her skin glowing with the kind of health I only dreamed of. At first, I was happy for her, genuinely. But as we talked, as she shared stories of her glamorous travels, her promotion at work, her picture-perfect relationship, something dark began to stir inside me. I felt it gnawing at my insides, a small, bitter voice whispering that I deserved those things too. Why wasn't my life like hers? Why didn't I have her luck, her beauty, her success? I pushed the feelings aside, telling myself that envy was ugly, that it was beneath me. But the seed had been planted and it grew quickly. I started comparing everything in my life to hers, my job, my apartment, my relationships. And in every comparison, I came up short. My life, once satisfying, now seemed dull and insignificant in the shadow of her perfection. It wasn't long before I began to obsess over her social media profiles. I would spend hours scrolling through her posts, poring over every picture, every smiling selfie, every carefully curated image of her perfect life. The more I looked, the more the envy burned inside me, a constant, gnawing pain that wouldn't let me rest. One night, as I lay in bed unable to sleep, I found myself wishing, no, praying, that I could have what she had, that somehow I could trade places with her, even just for a day, to feel what it was like to be her, to live her life. The thought consumed me, and before I knew it, I was muttering the words aloud, a desperate plea to whoever might be listening. The next morning, something felt different. As I went about my day, I noticed small changes. My clothes fit better, my skin looked clearer, my hair fell perfectly without any effort. People at work complimented me more than usual, and everything seemed to go my way. It was as if the universe had decided to answer my plea, and I relished in it, feeling the burn of envy ease into a warm, satisfying glow. But as the days passed, the changes became more pronounced, and they weren't all good. I started having vivid dreams, nightmares really, where I was Emily, living her life. In these dreams, I was surrounded by her friends, her family, her success, but there was always a darkness lurking just out of sight. No matter how perfect everything seemed, there was an underlying current of dread, as if something terrible was waiting to happen. Worse, I began to notice things in the real world, small, unsettling details that didn't make sense. My reflection in the mirror would sometimes look different, just for a split second, more like Emily's face than my own. I'd catch myself saying things she would say, using her mannerisms, her expressions. It was as if I was becoming her, piece by piece, and the more it happened, the less I felt like myself. One night, after another nightmare where I was trapped in Emily's life, I woke up to find a text from her on my phone. It was simple, just one word: help. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen, a sense of dread washing over me. I tried calling her, but there was no answer. I rushed to her apartment, fear gnawing at me, and when I arrived, I found the door slightly ajar. Inside, the apartment was eerily silent, the air thick with tension. I called out her name, but there was no response. I searched every room, but she was nowhere to be found. Instead, I found something far worse. Her phone lying on the floor, the screen shattered, and on it, a single message written in my handwriting. I have everything now. I stumbled back, horror dawning on me. The nightmares, the changes, the slow erosion of my identity. It wasn't just envy. It was something much darker, something that had been waiting for me to let it in. And now, it had taken Emily. It had taken her life, her soul, leaving behind only a shell. In that moment, I realized the terrible truth. My wish had been granted, but not in the way I had imagined. I hadn't become her. I had stolen her life, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of her. And now, I was trapped in her place, living her life, but with the knowledge that it wasn't truly mine, that it was all a lie. The burn of envy had consumed me, and in doing so, it had destroyed us both. Now, every time I look in the mirror, I see her staring back at me, her eyes hollow, filled with the same envy that had once burned in mine. And I know that it's only a matter of time before the darkness comes for me too, taking back what I never should have wished for. It's funny how we always think we have more time. Time to fix our mistakes, to mend the broken pieces of our lives, to say the things we left unsaid. But time isn't kind, and it doesn't wait for anyone. I learned that the hard way, the night I first saw the shadow. I'd just come home from a long day at work, the kind of day that leaves you drained and hollowed out. All I wanted was to sink into the couch and forget about everything. But as I walked into my apartment, I felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. At first, I brushed it off as exhaustion, a trick of the mind, but the feeling persisted, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. The apartment was dark, save for the faint glow of the streetlights filtering through the curtains. I flicked on the lights and scanned the room, half expecting to see someone standing there. But it was empty, just the way I had left it. Still, the unease didn't fade. I could feel something in the air, a presence that shouldn't have been there. That's when I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement. I turned quickly, my heart pounding in my chest, but there was nothing there. Just shadows playing tricks on me, I told myself. But deep down, I knew better. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and sleepless nights. Every time I entered my apartment, I felt it. The eyes on me, the shadowy figure lurking just out of sight. It never showed itself fully, always hovering at the edge of my vision, disappearing the moment I tried to focus on it. I started to dread coming home, but where else could I go? Wasn't like I could escape my own mind. I thought about telling someone, but who would believe me? It sounded crazy, even to me. So I kept it to myself, hoping that it would just go away, that I was imagining things. But the shadow had other plans. One night, as I sat alone in the dim light of my living room, I felt a chill run down my spine. The air grew heavy, suffocating, as if the room itself was closing in on me. I looked around, trying to find the source of the feeling, and that's when I saw it, clearer than ever before. It was standing in the corner of the room, just beyond the reach of the light, a tall, dark figure, its shape indistinct, like a mass of swirling shadows. I couldn't see its face, if it even had one, but I could feel its gaze, cold and piercing, boring into me. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at it, unable to move, paralyzed by fear. For what felt like an eternity, we were locked in that silent standoff, neither of us moving. And then, slowly, the shadow began to speak. Its voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried a weight that sent chills through my entire body. "You left me," it said, the words echoing in the room. "You left me behind." My heart pounded in my chest as the meaning of those words began to sink in. This wasn't just any shadow. It was the embodiment of my regret, my guilt, the things I had buried deep inside, hoping they would never resurface. But they had found me, and now they wanted answers. The shadow moved closer, and I could feel its cold presence creeping over me. Do you remember? It asked, its voice laced with accusation. Do you remember what you did? I did. How could I forget? The memories came flooding back, memories I'd tried so hard to forget. The people I'd hurt, the opportunities I'd squandered, the lies I'd told to myself and others, all the regrets, all the mistakes I'd made, embodied in this dark, vengeful presence standing before me. I didn't mean to. I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. I was young. I didn't know. Lies, the shadow hissed, its form growing darker, more solid. You knew. You always knew. But you didn't care. I could feel the truth of its words like a knife in my chest. I had always known, deep down, that I was running from my past, from the things I had done, the people I had wronged. And now, the shadow of that past had come to claim me. Please, I begged, tears streaming down my face. Please, I'm sorry. I can change. I can make it right. The shadow laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed through the room. Too late, it said, its voice dripping with malice. Too late for apologies. Too late to change. It lunged at me, its cold, dark form engulfing me, wrapping itself around me like a shroud. I felt its coldness seep into my bones, freezing me from the inside out. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, as the shadow pulled me down into the darkness. And then, everything went black. When I awoke, I was alone. The apartment was silent, the shadow gone, but I could feel it, still there, lurking inside me, a permanent part of me now. I knew it wouldn't let go, that it would follow me wherever I went, a constant reminder of the regrets that had consumed me. I've tried to move on, to live my life as best I can, but the shadow is always there, always watching, always waiting. I can't escape it, can't outrun it. The weight of my past is too heavy, too dark, and it's pulling me down, slowly but surely. And every night, as I lay in bed, I can feel it growing stronger, the darkness inside me spreading, consuming everything I am. It's only a matter of time before it takes me completely, before I become just another shadow, lost to the regrets that haunt me.